name's John Bonifaz. I'm the co-founder and director of Free Speech for People, and I'm honored to be here with all of you and on this distinguished panel. I do want to acknowledge Jeff Clements, who's in the back there, is the co-founder and general counsel of Free Speech for People, and together with a coalition of public interest organizations, we launched this campaign moments after the United States Supreme Court issued its ruling in January of last year in Citizens United Vieth. A ruling, as you all well know, which was a radical departure from settled First Amendment law, which overturned a century of precedent barring corporate spending in our elections, which equated corporations with people having free speech rights and has unleashed unlimited corporate spending in our elections, and we've seen just the beginnings of that impact in the 2010 election cycle. I want to just highlight, with respect to this ruling, that many of us have viewed it from the lens as a campaign finance question. And as somebody who's worked, as some of you may know, for many years in that field, I firmly believe that that is a core element of the decision and of the problem. But I also believe we make a mistake when we don't look at the broader challenge that's before us. This is not just a campaign finance ruling, as important as that is. This is a corporate rights ruling. This is, in fact, the most extreme extension of a corporate rights doctrine that has eroded the First Amendment in our Constitution for the past 30 years. An effort by corporate America to inject into the Constitution rights that do not belong to these artificial entities. Corporations are not people. They do not breathe. They do not think. They do not have a conscience. In fact, they have state-based advantages that you and I do not have. Limited liability, perpetual life, the ability to aggregate wealth and distribute wealth. And for those reasons, we have recognized for more than 2 centuries, prior to this doctrine emerging, that corporations should be treated differently. James Madison spoke of corporations as a necessary evil, subject to proper limitations and guards. Thomas Jefferson hoped to crush in its birth the aristocracy of our moneyed corporations. And for the first 2 centuries of our nation's history, the federal courts followed the framers' intent on that very question. But now we have moved from that point to see this corporate rights doctrine emerge. And that is, I think, what needs to be addressed at its root. This is how unchecked corporate power is subverting our democracy. When we look at the fiscal crisis on Wall Street that's led to the economic situation we're in today, it's a story of unchecked corporate power subverting our democracy and our government. The BP oil catastrophe in the Gulf of Mexico, the Massey energy disaster, 29 coal miners dying in West Virginia, the media consolidation that all of us are here and talking about at this conference, all of these are examples of unchecked corporate power subverting our democracy and our government. So how do we fight back? Free Speech for People, we are pressing for a 28th Amendment to the Constitution that will make clear that people govern, not corporations, that will ensure that we restore democracy to the people. We have done this before in our nation's history, 27 times before. Once every decade in the last century, except the 1940s and the 1980s. 7 of those amendments, 7, have overturned egregious Supreme Court rulings of the past. Article 5 of the Constitution sets out this power that we the people have to expand our democracy, to ensure that all of us have voices in the political process, and, when necessary, to overturn the Supreme Court. We must do that again. Now, we have launched this campaign. We've got tens of thousands who have joined us. We urge you to join us. But we also see this as something that has to be built from the grassroots. as much as this has to come from Congress eventually, 2/3 of the Congress sending to the states for ratification, the states have to get engaged in the beginning. And so we're engaged in helping to organize and work with citizens at the local level to press for resolutions to be passed at your local town level, your local city level, and your state legislative level, pressing for resolutions, calling on Congress to push for a constitutional amendment, to hold the kind of teach-ins and forums, public forums, rallies, and town meetings necessary to educate the public about the threat of this corporate rights doctrine and why we must press for this kind of amendment. And that's the kind of organizing I think we need to do here today. You know, we did some research recently with Hart Research Associates, Peter Hart, well-respected pollster, and this has been alluded to, but I just want to spell this out further. He commissioned a comprehensive study for us on the question of the Citizens United ruling, what people thought about it, and what people thought about a constitutional amendment to address it. Overwhelming majorities across the political spectrum oppose this rule, and overwhelming majorities support a constitutional amendment. 87% of Democrats, 85% of independents, 68% of Republicans support a constitutional amendment to make it clear that corporations are not people. Corporations do not have the rights of people under the Constitution. So I just want to end with this, which is that I know some in this room will say, well, this is impossible. We can't amend the Constitution anymore. And the story I like to tell in response to that is the story of Doris Haddon, otherwise known as Granny D. Many of you may remember, at the age of 89, she decided to walk across the country to overhaul our nation's campaign finance system. She set out from California, walking 10 miles a day. She didn't have a grand plan as to how she was going to do this. She knew the general direction she was supposed to go. But she didn't have a grand plan as to how she was going to be housed, how she was going to be fed. Random strangers came out of their homes. They housed her. They fed her. They walked with her for part of the way. She walked through the rain, through the wind, through the snow. She cross-country skied in places. Turning 90 in the process. 14 months later, 3,200 miles later, she reached Washington, D.C. to be greeted then by then-Senator Russ Feingold and Senator John Kane and hundreds of others that day. I was honored to have been there that day to help greet her, and I was honored to have known her and to have worked with her. In March of last year, she passed away at the age of 100. And when she heard about this ruling, by the way, in January of last year, she thought about walking across the country again. But when she passed away, I thought about the fact that when she was born, the 19th Amendment, guaranteeing women the right to vote, had yet to be enacted. She saw in her lifetime 9 amendments passed by the United States Congress, ratified by 3/4 of the states. She is an example that change can happen in a lifetime, including a constitutional amendment. In the name of Granny D, it is time for a 28th Amendment to the Constitution to make clear that we the people rule, not we the corporations. Thank you.